Honestly, you don't even hello. We are back. Oh my god, caught me mid a pregame yawn. It's a tradition for me on the show here. But it is I, Corbin Ford, with, as always, good friend, semi co host, Josh Earl. Josh, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. That was a delightful way to start. I think you caught it perfectly, though. I don't think it actually came into the recording, but it was funny watching your face adjust mid yawn.
Oh. It was like, oh, we got time. Oh no, we don't. No. But, today we are thrilled to finally be getting into the first of a few of these type of series we'll hopefully be doing. This has been talked about for a minute now. It's really been a scheduling thing on my end, but really happy to get into our, well, I guess, continuation of our GM retrospectives, except we spiced it up a little bit. Before we've done, I think we did one or two at least looking back
Yeah,
on an
I think we
executive
did
moves they made.
Isaiah Thomas, and then I think we also did
There we
Joe
go, Joe
Dumars. Yeah.
Dumars.
Yep.
There we are. Yep. And so that was cool. Just kind of looking back on what we like, we didn't like, kind of giving a beat by beat process transaction type of analysis on that executive's moves, what trends we found, etc., etc. However, in this one, we're going to be just a little bit different. We've put on our GM thinking caps in addition to our analysis. So we're going to look back on one famed NBA executive, talk about what went well, not much, what didn't go well, a whole lot, and why that was what it was. And then we will attempt to reconstruct some of the decision making processes for this executive, how we would do things differently, what our thought process would be, and hopefully how we would come up with a different roster. We do have the benefit of hindsight, so that's always a thing there. But you know what? It's still going to be a fun exercise in retrospect, especially since this executive was doing some moves that were off the beaten path even in real time. So, Josh, would you like to give some background information on the one, the only, the David Kahn?
Kahn! Yes. So David Kahn was hired by the Timberwolves May 22nd of 2009, and then was in charge of basketball operations through May 3rd of 2013. It's not a long time, which would suggest, like Corbin said, that not a lot went right. Um, the weird thing is I've met this guy twice in person. Interesting vibes. Um, and yeah, a lot didn't go well for him. I believe they missed the playoffs the entire time that he was in charge. Um, and he managed to alienate his star player at one point by kind of shortchanging him in negotiations for a rookie scale extension. Um, Also, is very well known for taking 2 point guards back to back in the top six in the 2009 draft, and neither of those point guards were named Steph Curry. And then he gets a lot of unfair flack in that draft as well, because technically the Timberwolves selected Ty Lawson with the 18th pick, another point guard, and Nick Calathis, a fourth point guard, with their second round pick, the 45th pick. But that's one of those things that fans and media kind of get lost on. The Nuggets made the Ty Lawson pick. It's just Minnesota had to make that selection for them. Same with the Mavs taking Nick Calathis with the 45th pick. So there were some things that I think get overblown when it comes to Khan, but there are definitely some things that maybe don't get blown enough. Yeah.
I like that. There you go. Like, some things get made too much attention to, and there's other things that you could definitely give more attention to.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that makes an excellent point. David Kahn for me has always been one. I've, of course, never actually met the person, but one of my favorite written pieces I've ever did was looking back on all of David Kahn's moves. Really enjoy that just because it was like, wow, I actually found him an engaging personality from the sense of, wow, how can someone so self-assured and confident to the point of
Well said.
arrogance
Yeah.
make the level of moves that he did that were so actively destructive, questionable at best, destructive at worst. And yeah, it was one of those things that was very interesting to me. So I went back and when I wrote this piece, it was like a 20-minute read if I remember right. 15-minute read. I was looking back on all of his interviews and everything he was thinking, and I literally went beat by beat on every move. And it was like, wow, like that is insane. Some of the moves he would make, whether that was, like you said, the drafting back-to-back point guards, and not even two of the best. One I'd say was average in that ranking, and one unfortunately fell a little far behind, huh?
Yeah. So I just got to throw this out there early on. Johnny Flynn got screwed pretty bad in this whole endeavor. Johnny Flynn, obviously he didn't pan out, but I don't think he necessarily was a bad player. I think a lot of things contributed to him not having a particularly strong career to start out with. One, he thrived as a pick and roll point guard in college.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes into a team, and this is the first major problem I think Kahn had, is Kahn hired Kurt Rambis to be his coach because he wanted somebody to play to run the triangle offense with a primarily young team. And then he drafts a pick and roll point guard who first needs to adjust to being in the league and who is basically playing with the specter of his replacement, who was drafted a pick before him, coming up to the team like in the next season or two. So he's already got like the Reaper's scythe over his head, metaphorically speaking. He's got to adjust to playing on the NBA level, and now a pick and roll point guard is trying to learn how to run the frickin' triangle offense as a rookie. And then on top of it, he suffered a hip injury, I think in his second year or third year. And hip injuries are really difficult to adjust to and recover from and everything. So obviously he didn't have a very good career, but I want to throw it out there, Johnny Flynn. I don't think it was your fault. I think you kind of just had a bunch of extreme speed bumps lined right up at the starting line for you, and it made it hard to like pick up speed in your career. So, shout out to Johnny Flynn. Sorry you got drafted by David Kahn with the 6th pick in 2009 after Ricky Rubio, and then everything that I just said.
I like that you went into that though. Like it isn't exactly his fault. In fact, funny thing, Sports Illustrated put out a "Where Are They Now" piece on Johnny Flynn just 2 days ago
Oh,
from the
really?
recording.
I
Yes, they
have to
did.
look that up. Yeah.
Yes, so cool they did that. So definitely make sure to check that out, kind of see what he's up to. But yeah, it was unfortunate. I don't mean to bag on Johnny Flynn. I'm not gonna lie. When I first ever was introduced to Johnny Flynn, was playing like NBA 2K11. I was like, oh my
Okay.
God, can this guy hit a jump shot? Like I was so mad. And looking back on it now, it's not his fault that he was the player he was. A lot of players have shaky jump shots, can penetrate to the rim, undersized, whatever the case may be. That hip injury obviously did some damage, and it's very unfortunate that it did.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of him being like an Anthony Bennett or Darko Milicic, of being a guy who would have been in the NBA, just not at the draft selection that he was, and therefore the expectations, the
Mm-hmm.
outsized expectations that were attached to that went onto him. By all
Yeah.
accounts, great guy, had the charisma, the leadership, the swagger, all of
Yep.
that. You would definitely have seen a really good piece, late in the lottery, whatever the case may
Yes.
be. But to draft him 6 and say, okay, the franchise is part yours, especially since our next point guard isn't coming over for another year, and we don't have a roster fit to your strengths because we are doing the triangle with Kurt
Yeah.
Rambis. Yeah, that causes some issues.
And it gets magnified when Steph becomes Steph. And even like some of the other players who had strong careers afterwards, who were taken after him, that magnifies like, oh, so not only did you take him after you selected another point guard, but you selected him ahead of Steph Curry, Ty Lawson, Drew Holiday. I think Darren Collison was in that draft class too,
Yes,
all
it
of whom
was.
had pretty good to really good careers. So Johnny Flynn kind of hit the jackpot in terms of like bad luck for starting your NBA career.
Unfortunately, he did. That is true. As we kind of continue on before we get to our own exercise, any other thoughts by David Kahn, highlights or lowlights you want to kind of bring out here real quick? Obviously, the
Yeah.
2009 draft was the seminal moment. You know,
Yes.
the one tentpole moment for his career. But any others that come to mind?
Yeah. So another one was I forget which draft year it was, but he actually in the second round selected somebody who was actually too old and was ineligible to be selected in the draft. Um, it was like
Oh, the
Tangway.
Infe Tange Ngumbo.
Yeah. I forget
Yes.
which season it was,
So,
but like,
fun,
yes.
funny story. This is a deep take, but 2K12, 2K13 had a port for the PSP.
Hmm.
I'm a portable gamer. I used to play that game all the time. Tengen Gumbo was in it,
Okay.
and they also apparently that's just. I mean, 2K didn't care that much about
Yeah.
no love
Yeah.
lost between me and 2K, but 2K didn't care that much about the roster or whatever. So they put him in the game with the age that David Kahn thought that Nagumbo was at 24 or whatever. So
Hmm.
I used to play with him almost out of spite. It was really good because he was just like a generic, like really good shooter, had like a good dunk package. And so I'd grab him and be like, yeah, I'm playing with a guy who isn't even eligible for the NBA in this time, but it's okay. So it's funny. That's why I knew it as soon as you said off the top. Yeah, talk about doing your research, both David Kahn and 2K. But back to you, sir.
Yes. Yeah. And then the other thing that kind of comes to mind isn't even necessarily a bad signing per se, but just a bad outing publicly at the summer league, talking about after they signed Darko Milicic as a free agent, which at the time I actually thought was a solid free agent signing. It's not like they expected him to be great, just a shot blocking rim protector who can help out. Um, but at the summer league, he was actually sitting with Chris Webber, and he was talking about how Darko Milicic reminded him a little bit of Vlade and even Chris Webber himself, and even said that being able to sign Darko was like mana from heaven. And it was just a really, really poor understanding of who he was with, and not the greatest use of tact in terms of how to communicate. Like, yeah, we're really excited about him, and we like his passing ability and that sort of thing. Um, but you probably shouldn't, when talking with Chris Webber on a televised broadcast and everything, talk about how he reminds you of a Vladi Divac and Chris Webber himself, both of whom will be Hall of Famers. Like,
Yeah, it was a severe misstep, made even more awkward when Chris Webber like twice was like, "Please do not put me and
yep,
Darko in the same sentence."
yep,
Like in the middle of it, like I'm, and he kept saying, "Well, don't you agree?" Khan kept pressing it. Well, what do you think? Don't you
yes,
agree? And Webber's like, "No, I don't," and we're not gonna put me and David, we're not gonna put me and Darko in the same sentence. I was like, "Yikes!" The cringe. So no, it was definitely something that was true, and you're right. I think in a nutshell. I think my favorite memory was the show of hands press conference that David Kahn did after it was the end of the 2010 season, if I remember. And I mean, it was another disappointing year, slight improvement. They went from 15-67, the Timberwolves did, to 17-65. Uh,
woo,
they were 10 points per game, but they were dead last in defense. And so he did like a State of the Wolves address at the end of the season and did a show of hands line. He's like, "Hey, I think we've made some improvements down the line. I think Rubio will be here soon. Kevin Love's played better. Like some of our role players stepped up, particularly in the end of the season. When teams really don't care. But we got some real big wins against the Lakers and whatever. So like, what do y'all think? Show of hands." He's looking around for like maybe 10 seconds. It's silence. As he looks down for a hand, he's like, "Oh, I guess not. No one really thinks so, but I do." Well, yeah, of course you do, Con. Like that's the point. So it was hilarious for him to ask the room and his complete inability to read the said room. Get no hands in the press conference when you were touting the improvements you've made. It just seemed to illustrate the view that Khan saw that the rest of us normal people didn't, or us lowly people. I don't want to say normal. Khan was special.
So this brings up one of the times I did meet Khan was at a career conference thing in Vegas at Summer League, and he was a speaker, and I forget which year it was. Must have been, I think, 2011, because one of the attendees was from Utah, and during the Q&A section, raised his hand, and he was called upon, and he's like, I don't really have a question, I just want to thank you for Al Jefferson. And Kahn, without like missing a beat, almost like he had it preloaded, was like, thanks for taking his remaining X amount of dollars on his contract.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, interesting, man. Like, I
Yeah,
don't necessarily disagree in terms of like, was he worth the money at that point in time, given what your team was like, but kind of a harsh rebuttal to somebody who was there hoping to break into the league, and was kind of perhaps a little too eager to make a statement instead of a question to a GM. But I thought it was interesting that Khan was just right there out of the gate, like, thanks for taking his contract.
that is kind of fun. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, wow. I mean, it just goes to show you the kind of person that he at least present himself through the media. There you go.
Yeah.
Because I think it's always one side you see in front of the cameras and one side behind. There's probably more you can read into a person, but that's a whole nother thing. This is the Roundball Ramble podcast,
Yeah.
not the Roundball Psychology podcast. So I'm not going to go too deep into
No.
it, but yeah, I think it's definitely interesting. But with that being said, 4 years, the Timberwolves in all had just a horrific time of it throughout his 4 years. Mind you, he did show improvement every year, as funny as that may be. 2009-2010 season finished 15-67. 2010-2011 season finished 17-65. 2011-2012 season finished 26-40, and he closed out with the 2012-2013 season finishing 31-51. Well below standards. He thought he could win a championship in a set number of years. I mean, that didn't happen, but I did think it was funny that with all of that, like, improvement, however slight and under talked about because of how big he had, kind of screwed up the team in the long run, it was funny to see that. But I think the biggest thing to kind of close out on the Kahn retrospective before going into our own analysis is the little bit of business that occurred during the 2012 season, where you had a 23-year-old Kevin Love, fresh off averaging 24 points and 14 rebounds per game. He had signed a 4-year extension that included an opt-out after the third, which you go, that's curious. But to make it even more curious, that wasn't even Love's desired option. Love wanted the full 5-year extension, committing himself as the face of the franchise, but for reasons that were never clearly disclosed, Kahn pushed for a shorter deal.
Oh,
And I want to
it
get
was
your.
disclosed.
It was disclosed.
It just wasn't. It wasn't that
Publicized?
clearly about the Kevin Love thing. Kahn didn't want to give him the 5-year extension because that would have prevented him from giving that to Ricky.
Oh, choosing. Oh, wow.
Yep.
That makes it even more interesting.
Which gets us into the whole concept of, for lack of a better term, what some people call basketball orphans, and your guys. And while Kevin Love was obviously the best player for the Timberwolves during Kahn's era, Kahn didn't draft him. He wasn't Kahn's guy. Ricky was Kahn's guy. Ricky was the guy he moved off, Randy Foye, Mike Miller for. He made a big show of like, we don't care if you come over a year down the line. We want you specifically. Ricky was his guy. And in spite of all the evidence that, like, Kevin Love, you should lock him down as long as you can right now, Kahn was still holding out that, like, no, Ricky is the face of this franchise because he's my guy. I drafted him. in my head, he is the Minnesota Timberwolves, not Kevin Love.
Wow. Wow. Well, there you go. There. I mean, it makes sense as someone who plays a lot of these GM type games. I have a type, and you want to ride with that guy thick or thin. And if you inherit a guy that as talented as Kevin Love was compared to Rubio, as clearly showing of being the face of the franchise over Rubio. Rubio was always a very good ancillary player. You gave an excellent breakdown. I appreciate that 'cause I was never fully sure, and that makes total sense now. But even then, it just shows how short-sighted it was. And yes,
Yes.
Love was drafted under Kevin McHale's administration, which is before Kahn's. However, he'd already shown himself. Like I said, 24 points and 14 rebounds per game at age 23.
Yes. It was
If that doesn't
evident.
show the talent, exactly. So fun there. And
I
yeah,
do
mhm.
I do think there's like one other big Kahn retrospective we have to touch upon before we get into how we would approach things,
Let's do
which
it.
is the drafting of Derek Williams #2 after they already had Kevin Love and had traded from Michael Beasley.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna have a disagreement on this
Yeah.
philosophically. I know we are, but let's do it.
So the problem is at that point in time, Kevin Love and Michael Beasley are your two best players, right? They're getting the bulk of the minutes. So Kevin Love's getting the bulk of the minutes at the 4. Michael Beasley's getting the bulk of the minutes at the 3, and Derek Williams is probably best served playing the 4. And even if you think Derek Williams was one of the best prospects in that draft class, and at the time, I think almost everyone agreed he was definitely one of the best prospects in that draft class, definitely worthy of the second pick heading into that draft class. It didn't work out that way, in part because as a rookie coming in, how do you establish your confidence, your role, and your rhythm when you're essentially splitting time with the two like leaders of the team, not only in terms of like profile, but in terms of touches, minutes, production, and everything? How do you kind of put your foot in and it like put your foot down, make your stand and like stamp your place on the organization when you are playing minutes behind Kevin Love, minutes behind Michael Beasley, and you can't really like slide Love and Beasley down a slot and then have like a ridiculously horrible defense with Kevin Love, Michael Beasley, and Derek Williams up front. So that was a case of like, I understand the appeal of best player available and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
when you look at best player available, you have to clarify it for your team. And given that context, unless you were trading Beasley or Love, there was very low odds that Williams would have reached his potential with the Timberwolves behind Beasley and Love.
I mean, yeah. Looking back on it, I still held out hope that you could have a tantalizing athletic front court between Beasley and Williams, and that almost as a precursor to now, Love would just be at the 5. And yes, defensively, this team would not be super great, but the potential for me at least. I don't know. I was a big Derek Williams fan. Like when we're gonna talk about 2009 and 2010 to a certain extent, I was more or less a general fan, wasn't really diving in, wasn't really into it like that. But come 2011, the draft time came and I was all in on Derek Williams. Had a jersey of his for the longest. Really thought he'd be a star in Minnesota. 2K didn't help me with that because it totally made me think he could be. And you're right. Some of his, flaws of at being 6'8", being more naturally suited at a power forward spot, although playing the small forward, not being the best shooter, take advantage of that, not being the best dribbler, having natural athleticism for the open floor. But again, playing under Kurt Rambis' triangle offense, where a lot of these Wolves' strengths were mitigated because you didn't have the type of offensive system, best utilized to bring the most out of them. So I think that was also a significant factor as well.
I think you froze for a split sec.
Uh-oh. One sec. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You're good now.
Okay, weird. Cool, cool. Uh, so what I froze for a second there, but I was talking about
Talking
how
about Rambus
the
and
offensive
how this,
system,
yeah.
the system wasn't best utilized. But as we get into this draft, we'll see some better options that will definitely make the Derek Williams one look a little short-sighted. But with that being said, Josh, are you ready to go into the practicum part of this?
Yeah. From this point forward, we'll act as if instead of David Kahn getting hired, Corbin and I were hired as co-GMs.
There you
So
go. I like it.
that's how we're approaching this series going forward. Is we'll reflect upon what went well and what didn't go well, and with Kahn, there unfortunately wasn't much that went well. Uh, uh, and then we'll look at how we might have approached things over their tenure as well to get a different kind of perspective. And admittedly, there's going to be a little hindsight bias, but we're also going to try to approach this from how we viewed things at that time, in terms of the players we liked and everything. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get started. We are going in the way, way back machine back to the 2009 NBA draft. And before we go into who we would pick with the selections, let's talk about that fifth pick, the Wizards deal,
mhm.
where the Wolves sent Randy Foye and Mike Miller to the win now, quote unquote, Washington Wizards in exchange for the fifth pick in this draft. First, as the GM on your end, Josh, do you still make that deal?
I'm a little hesitant from the perspective of Mike Miller was one of the noted best teammates, like by everybody he played with, and would have provided a good veteran presence, especially for a young team that's going to be, having some growing pains and everything. Plus, provided the type of shooting and just general perimeter offensive glue that would help a young team kind of navigate some of the lows of a season. That said, ultimately, it's rare that you can get two top six picks in any draft. So I understand it, and also Mike Miller was going to be a free agent after that season. Was already 28, I believe. So didn't really align with the likes of the 20-year-old Kevin Love or the 24-year-old Al Jefferson. Corey Brewer's 22, etc. So I'm okay with it. I'd feel a little bad sending Mike Miller away, but I would agree with it. But before we even get into that, I think the number one thing that Kahn messed up was, let's do the triangle and let's hire Kurt Rambis to do that triangle. So I think my big focus first off as a co-GM would be, Corbin, let's come together and let's find us a coach that we think will accentuate the players that we have and
Mm,
accentuate the players that we're interested in. In this draft class, we know we're drafting at least one point guard, one rookie point guard.
yep.
And obviously, you do the fifth pick deal at that time to kind of put yourself in position to get somebody like a Ricky Rubio potentially with one of those two picks. And so for that reason, I think you focus on a coach that's going to embrace transition, that's going to embrace a looser framework and a looser structure, if you will, and let, the point guard that you select kind of do what they need to do to be successful and put their stamp on the team and stuff. So for that reason, I'd probably look towards Mike Budenholzer, who at the time had just come off of like a season after winning the championship with San Antonio as the lead assistant. Um, Always emphasized teamwork, player and ball movement, communication, spacing. Obviously, since he's been a head coach, we've seen reasons to maybe not like how he does some of his minutes allocations and stuff like that. But we can also see that he's generally been a pretty good head coach in terms of like regular season success, getting to the playoffs, and obviously won a championship with the Bucks. So I think a coach like Budenholzer would have been a much better fit than a Kurt Rambis looking to run the triangle with one of the youngest teams in the league.
Definitely interesting. I like where you're going with it. Not the biggest Budenholzer fan as from what we see now,
That's
but back
fair. Yeah.
then I absolutely would be. I mean, my pick was a little more bold. He actually just got he was forced to resign from his team as his front office wanted a young up and coming coach to help revive the Warriors' fortunes at the time. But
Oh,
noted
of course.
winner,
Of
third coach in
course.
the NBA history to win 1,000 games at the time, back in 2001. You know who I'm going with. I'm
Yep.
going with Don Nelson.
That's
I think
fair. I'd like either of those guys. Either of them's going to bring a lot more movement and more, for lack of a better term, like authenticity for the players in the system. They're going to have a little less rigid structure and let the players kind of, you know, do what they need to do to feel comfortable and stuff. So, yeah,
exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
cool with either of them.
There you go. And
As
also, I
long
mean,
as
it's
we
not.
have a different head coach and we're not running the triangle, I'm happy.
There we go. Exactly. And I was going to say there's precedent for, David Kahn hiring older legendary coaches. We saw right after the Kurt Rambis
Hmm.
experiment, he was able to lure Rick Adelman over to Minnesota
Yep.
for a couple of years there. So there is something there. But you're right. First order of business, not Kahn, Rambis by. I wish the Lakers would say the same thing in the front office, but that's not my point. But now we go to the fifth pick. I would do that deal, Josh. I just feel like Foy was a mistake. You got to realize, in the front office, you make a decision. Like, don't double down on it. I mean, granted, it wasn't the decision of I would not even want to imagine what Khan would have done in the 2006 NBA draft to draft Randy Foy over Brandon Roy. But the point being, it was there. Randy Foy, solid shooter. I would say a decent secondary ball handler, not a whole lot else. So him gone, and Mike Miller, though being a boost in the locker room, being a very good shooter. 28, again,
Hmm.
no. So I would
Yep.
send both of them over the fifth pick. And so with that being said, if we have the fifth pick and the sixth pick, let's first look at the candidates for the fifth pick. And you laid these out pretty nicely, I think, in order. You had Stephen Curry, Drew Holiday, and DeMar DeRozan. I threw in a fourth one.
Okay.
Although I liked him better for the sixth pick, I wanted him in the picture, and that was a Jeff Teague.
Yeah, I'd probably not go with Jeff Teague personally, but
No,
like
not for
I
the fifth
probably
pick, but I
have
wanted.
Ricky on this list too. I forgot to put Ricky on the list, but like I
I
also wouldn't necessarily be too eager to draft a player who specifically kind of suggested like I don't want to play for you. Which I don't
who?
think Ricky
Oh, Ricky.
I don't think Ricky necessarily went the full like Jean Leon or your guy Stevie franchise um, on Minnesota, but Ricky also was like, yeah, I think I'm going to play a little bit longer overseas before I come over, and in that context, I'd have to slot him down behind those guys that we talked about, but I would still probably put him ahead of Teague, honestly.
Oh, see, that's funny. I looked at Teague's numbers, and I was already not sold on Ricky in general. Thought
Yep.
nice, flashy guy, but after that, I was like, no. But looking at Teague's numbers, and like I said, I wrote in my notes, I like him better for the sixth pick than the fifth.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
want him in the area. I have him ahead of Rubio. I think that I'm looking for
That's
someone stylistically who actually made an All-Star team for one. I mean, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but
future bias, but yeah.
yeah, that is very true. But also, I liked his more aggressive scoring. I think if you look at the numbers between him and Rubio,
Yeah, definitely more of a
much
scorer.
better
Yeah.
of a shooter, and we'll go on to him more later.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's first go with a guy we know will be off the board in the benefit of hindsight, but also he was pretty high even back then. That is
Oh
one
yeah, yeah.
Stephen Curry. What are your thoughts on him? Obviously,
Well, first off, this draft was really interesting because Steph could have gone as high as 2. Everybody
mm,
in the Memphis front office and the coaching staff wanted Steph at 2, but the owner at the time preferred Hasheem Thabeet. And then the other interesting thing is that Sam Presti and the Thunder actually had Thabeet ahead of Harden on their board. So if Steph had gone 2, Thabeet probably would have gone 3, and then Harden might have been 4 or 5 or something like that. So Steph wound up obviously slipping, if you will. But realistically, Steph never should have slipped, and he was highly thought of at the time. People didn't expect him to become a unanimous MVP or to become the greatest shooter of all time, but people definitely liked Steph a great deal. So with the fifth pick, we would have taken Steph Curry.
I feel like that's pretty cut and dry. That was a great way of breaking it down. I like the insight on that second pick as well, Josh. But
Yep.
yeah, Steph Curry, bona fide first person there. Best fit for any team because he sets the culture of the team. He sets the identity of the team. Amazing shooting, great fit with Love if you want to do it that way. Or
Yes.
you want to do a total rebuild, have Curry as a cornerstone. I mean, he's one of the top 10 players in the NBA history. Like, yeah, that happens. So,
Arguably the most impactful offensive player ever.
yeah, I mean, I have like Monte Ellis and a few others there, but right after that, I'm kidding, obviously,
Well,
but
I mean,
absolutely,
if Monte have it all, then
that's
by
what I'm saying.
definition, no one else can have it all. So, I
You get
mean, logically speaking, your argument
yes.
makes sense.
This is why we work so well together because exactly Monte have it all, and there it is. There's nothing more to say. I'm not
No.
going to dignify any more responses. But looking at, let's say worst case scenario, and
Mhm.
hindsight 2020, I'm sure others would. Curry's off the board at 5. What are your next kind of tertiary options for
Yeah.
that fifth pick?
Well,
Because
it
then
would
it gets
also
interesting.
depend on who would slide down, right? If Curry's off the board at 5, that means somebody like a Harden or a Tyreek Evans probably slides. I was never really a big Tyreek Evans fan personally. Um, I'd imagine my focus would probably shift to probably somebody like Drew Holiday. Um, I liked him then. I like him even more now.
Hmm.
Drew's also another guy who's great, like personality, like great culture setter type kid, coming out and obviously has gone on to have a really strong career. I'm not as big a fan of that DeRozan archetype as you are, but I would definitely be open to us having a conversation about like potentially taking DeRozan. And obviously, I would prefer Harden if Harden was the guy who slipped. But if it was like Tyreek Evans who slipped, I'd probably lean more Drew or DeRozan.
Okay. Yeah, I'm obviously a big DeRozan fan. That is my second pick for number 5. And the reason why I love Drew Holiday, I think Drew Holiday is a very, best two-way player available. Always find it funny to say two-way players with the NBA, but it's true. Someone who
Yep.
can perform, at an A plus, at an A level on both ends of the ball. I think he's better as an elite role player than a guy you build around. We didn't see a whole lot in Philadelphia. I think he did better alongside Anthony Davis, Tyreek, and Eric Gordon in New Orleans. He
Was
did
an
start to
all-star in
separate
Philly though.
himself. We're doing hindsight
Well,
there
I know
too.
you're saying you're
No, I'm
already doing
playing.
hindsight too, or
I know,
so
I know
okay.
it's hard. I'm
But
messing
like
with you.
he was an all-star in Philly, so
No, absolutely. I'm
but yes,
given
yeah, yeah.
a hard time there for sure. But no, I guess you're right. I mean, looking at that, that's a good pick. I like DeRozan not only because I think he's the best scorer behind Curry at this draft slot,
Yeah.
which is crazy considering the plethora of very good scoring options that they were, but a career 24-4 guy. You know what I mean? He could project as your second best player, I think, on a solid winning team. If he's your main guy, we've saw that in
Yeah.
Toronto, we saw that in Chicago. You're probably tapping out, middle of the pack with some pretty glaring weaknesses. However, if he is your second best player, whoever that would be, whether that's I don't want to say Kevin Love, if that guy's already on your roster, or you pick someone else, I think he is the best fit off the gate to say, okay, we can kind of build around this guy while we find another piece to tag along with him.
So this gets into like a bigger philosophical thing that I'm sure you and I have talked about and we'll talk about even more in depth later.
Always.
But DeRozan, to his credit, has become like extremely efficient in his role and has become a really great playmaker. But it took him like a decade plus to get there. Um, Yes, it did. You know, you know, you know.
I
Like,
mean,
I give him a lot of credit. Like, he's come a long way, but like his archetype was more akin to like Jerry Stackhouse, like super athletic guy who puts up shots, but wasn't necessarily taking or targeting highly efficient shots or necessarily helps his teammates get better. He was a scorer who wasn't necessarily like that efficient of a scorer. And personally, I'm not a big fan of building around such a player. That's just my approach. And again, at this point in time, I do really like DeRozan. I think DeRozan has become a playmaker who elevates his teammates' play. He has become a very efficient scorer, considering the types of shots he takes and stuff. Um,
mhm.
at the time and for a large part of his career, that was not the case. So I get the appeal of DeRozan, and like I said, I still had him as one of my candidates for the 5th and 6th picks, um, but I would still have preferred something else, just because I don't think that archetype rarely works out, and it rarely works out, particularly for the drafting team. Those players
Okay.
usually come into their own on second or third contracts, which are typically with a different team.
That's an excellent point. I was going to say, actually, he raised his assist percentage to just under 20%, but that did take year four. The 2013-2014 season was really when he broke out. And it's kind of funny to think about if you compare him to a guy like a Tyreek Evans, who had
Mhm.
uh, DeMar DeRozan like
Immediate breakout.
numbers
Yep.
immediately and then never approached those numbers again. Where DeRozan was a little slow in starting that, but once he
Mhm.
got there, like I said, you're right. For the beginning, he was just like a shooting kind of guy, mid range, get to the basket, not a 3-point shooter. We know it's still not a thing, but he had the assist percentage of 4.9, 8.6, 10.8, and 12 even
Yeah.
for his first
It,
4 years.
it grew.
Then
Yep.
18.9, a dip of 17, and then no lower than 20 for the rest of his career.
Yep.
Really going up at a high of 32 the season before with the Spurs, his last year there. So I definitely see where you're coming from there, and I think I am using, of course, some projection of that. I just think
Of
looking back at the
course.
scouting
Yeah.
reports of that time, I mean, people were a lot more higher on him being a main
Oh,
scoring
for
guard than he
sure.
was. So it's like if I
Well,
take the mix of
that's. I think
hindsight and
everybody likes scoring first and foremost. So like,
yeah, you can
I
anchor.
would even argue
That's the name of the
nowadays.
game.
I would even argue nowadays a player coming out, like if DeRozan was coming out nowadays as he was coming out of college, he'd still be very highly thought after and sought. Even if at this point in time we're more interested in efficiency in our scores and that sort of thing and like playmaking.
Hmm.
Um,
And also
yeah,
durability. Harden is the only guy who's had more career games played, field goals, and free throws than DeRozan
yeah.
among 2009 picks. So I get where you're coming from, and I think that'll be a very heated war room debate.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. Like
But yeah,
ultimately, I think what would happen with us is we would take Steph 5 and we would take DeRozan 6. I personally would also be like, well, I kind of wanted Drew, but I do think like if Steph is the number one and we already have Kevin Love and Al Jefferson and DeRozan, I think DeRozan doesn't necessarily have to take on a primary usage right off the bat and kind of so
absolutely. And I also would, and I wrote this in my own ideal offseason, I would do Drew Holiday fifth and DeRozan sixth if we didn't have Steph Curry.
oh well yeah, if we didn't have Steph Curry, yes.
Because you're right, Drew Holiday's the best fit, and then of course
Yeah, yeah,
defensively he can guard some of the tougher matchups that DeRozan can't. But you
yeah,
still have good size at 6'6" with DeRozan. But going from
yeah.
there to the sixth pick, I do want to make the argument for Jeff Teague, just bringing him out there. We know he won't
Go
let
ahead.
because he played with the Wolves already, right? From 2018 2020. I got the numbers from there: 12 points, 6 assists, 36% from three. For his career, the
Hmm.
dude actually averaged 12 points, 6 assists, 36% from three. I looked it up, not a typo. So you know what you're getting from him.
Consistent.
Uh, exactly. I did put the future All Star moniker there. Of course, hindsight. I was very tempted to put Darren Collison there, but I think that the
Yeah.
Darren Collison solid guard did not have the. I mean, Teague was solid, much more flashier numbers
Yeah.
for the first, like, I'd say 8 years of his career than Collison, but then dropped off a cliff when his decline came.
I think
Whereas,
I
mhm.
also think Collison was more of a playmaker and Teague was more of a scorer. So it
Yeah,
depends on like what you value more and like what you already have. But yeah,
yeah, it's funny. I actually took their peak years. I took like their 4 peak years and compared, and like assists per game and such all went to Teague, even though Teague was slightly healthier than Collison, which factored in as well. It's like, well, more assists go to Teague, okay, but why? Because of health. Well, it still factors in.
yeah,
However, Collison was remarkably consistent. We're talking
yeah.
12 points, between 12 and 15 points, and 7 and 9 assists per game for like 6 straight years. Solid shooting from three, only a hair below Jeff Teague career wise. So that's another guy as well that you can make an argument for with the sixth pick. But going from there, kind of picking up along, 18th pick, you have a plethora of options. You want to kind of go into those a little bit?
Yeah, so the 18th pick is where they entered into an agreement with Denver to trade the 18th pick for a future pick, which wound up being a 2010 first. Um, and honestly, out of the potential options, I'd probably still lean that way. Um, Considering that we're already bringing in two rookies, we already have a lot of youth already on the roster. I'd probably be inclined to net a subsequent extra first in the next draft, especially since players like Ty Lawson wouldn't really help us at that point. Unfortunately, Drew would be off the board by that point, so we couldn't get, Drew, Steph, and DeRozan as our perimeter trio. But some potential candidates who were still available at that pick, and you'll hear these names subsequently too. Taj Gibson, Danny Green, Patty Mills, Wes Matthews, and Joe Ingles, all guys who brought varying degrees of impact to NBA teams and have had long careers. And like I would probably look after getting Steph and DeRozan, and we already have Al Jefferson and Kevin Love up front. I'd probably look to a wing like a Danny Green or a Wes Matthews, um, if I were to use a pick like the 18th or one of the subsequent picks, the 28th, 45th, or 47th. You're muted, dude.
I do it once a show, and here it
It
happened.
it,
But
it
it's a
cha-ching, there it
staple, y'all.
is.
Boom, boom. Ching Thunder Moneyball. Anyway, going OKC's radio NBA announcing team was so elite for years. And Ching Thunder Moneyball, when I was watching, listen to Russell Westbrook, didn't happen often with it, Russ, but it happened a lot with Paul George. So, anyways, I like those picks. I think that you're right. Like Wesley Matthews would be a solid guy. I like Joe Ingles as well, a guy who was a previously undrafted, but a do-it-all player, good size, playmaking, shot the three ball well. He's personally my favorite option there, but I'm looking for more utility. A guy who
Yeah.
can fill in some gaps, like you mentioned. And I think that you get a guy like that with size who can do a little more on ball than a Wes Matthews or a Danny Green. Both guys very good. I mean, Danny Green, a career, almost 40% 3-point shooter. Taj Gibson, again, a guy, hustle player, solid fit, ready to play with the Wolves. Saw what he did there. Patty Mills probably my least favorite fit. He's a good spot shooter,
I
but he is
think
kind
of
of.
Patty as the Steph guy off the bench. So like he's not going to get
Mm,
big minutes, but he can replicate a lot of the actions that Steph runs through as well.
I like that. That
Yeah.
does make sense, and that would be something I would agree with. Yeah, for sure. I think my only issue with that would, of course, be that he defensively. I mean, at least Steph is
Oh yeah.
different there in terms of
Yeah.
size and profile, in a way that he just isn't. But aside from that, yeah, I agree completely. Going from that to the 28th pick, any uh readily available thoughts on that?
I mean, similar list of players, same with the 45th and 47th pick. I think you and I would probably see if we could package the 18th and the 28th pick for maybe future capital or see if we can also get future capital for the 28th pick if we did a
Hmm.
trade with Denver for the 2010 first. Simply because I believe one of Danny Green, Wes Matthews, Joe Ingles types should be available in the second round. And if they're not there at 45, and we know that Wes Matthews and Joe Ingles were, but if we were unsure, we'd always have the 47th and the 45th pick to trade up to get one of those guys. So I feel like we could get a Wes Matthews or a Joe Ingles or a Danny Green in the second round. And because we already are bringing in two rookies, and again, we have a young team, I'd probably look to trade that 28th pick first for future draft capital. What do you
That
think?
makes sense. I actually would agree with you completely on that. I think either, having more assets, in the cupboard, just red glass case of emergency, whatever the case may be, are great. Especially if you don't like the value back there. I've done a few simulations trying to, figure out who would be available there. Didn't really necessarily like the fit. And so it also puts you in play if you do grab some additional picks and you want to trade up for a player. I was partial to Patrick Patterson back then. A guy like that,
I like
you
P
know,
Pat. Yeah.
there you go. Like you can make a move with those picks to acquire that player if that was that guy on your main target board.
Mm,
So I agree with you completely for that. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, I mean, we kind of have the 45th and 47th pick in that same general ballpark. The only thing we need to dive in too much into that.
mm,
In that same thing, whether we are going to isolate the players we want, if they slip further, like I said, Joe Ingles went undrafted. You know what I mean? Like
yep.
that guy will be available. Want to take those two picks and let's parlay them to like a 2012 second or
Hmm.
something like that. See
Yep.
what happens. That'd be nice as well. So at least we have the option there. But now we move on to the 2010 NBA draft. And just saying the stage here, 2010 NBA draft was definitely an interesting one. This was the first look for Kahn to obviously put his print on the team was the 2009 draft, but the 2010 draft, you looked at the Wolves. They had 5 draft picks, 3 in the first round, and 1 in the top 5. It's
Yep.
not bad, right? You had talent like John Wall. You had
Hmm.
DeMarcus Cousins. You had Derek Favors. You also
Evan
had Evan.
Turner was a big
I was about to say Evan
prospect at the
Turner.
time. Yep.
Yep,
Greg
Greg
Monroe.
Monroe.
Yep.
Paul George and Gordon Hayward were also in the top 10. Al-Farouq Aminu as well. Now,
Hmm.
we all know, kind of decided to go in a different direction. Selected Wesley Johnson, the high
To
flying shooting guard from Syracuse.
to be fair to Khan, Wall, Evan Turner, and Derek Favors were all off the board, and the two players, your two arguably best players at that point in time, were Al Jefferson and Kevin Love. So DeMarcus doesn't seem quite as appealing if you already have like a young center and power forward combo already in place, and ones who have been to varying degrees productive.
Now, on the one hand, I give you that, and I don't want to not be fair to Khan because, like, Khan is great. But at the same time, I push back by saying that you end up trading Al Jefferson without getting a replacement. So,
Oh yeah,
like,
I agree.
if you're gonna say you trade Al Jefferson for Darko, like you clear the way with Al Jefferson in general. If the idea was you're gonna move Jefferson anyway, I
Yes,
think you
which
have an
he did
inside.
eventually in the off
In the
season before
offseason to
2011. Yeah, yeah.
yep, moved him over to Utah.
Utah.
It
Yep.
ended up being for Costa Kufis, a 2011 first round pick that became DeMontis Maniunas, and then a 2012 first rounder, which became Terrence Jones. Two,
Yep.
Decent role players, former
Getting
Rockets.
two first rounders for Al Jefferson, I like, and we'll get into this, but I have the feeling you and I probably have a similar idea, which is we would look to get that future capital for Al Jefferson now, and then
Hmm.
probably draft DeMarcus at 4.
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
and you said it, especially since I do like a potential inside outside fit with both Love and Cousins. Now,
Yes. Yep.
defensively, not at all, but both could. We saw the Cousins came in with the nice mid range shot, eventually stretched out to 3. Kevin Love had
Mhm.
already done the same thing. By this point, the transformation was already there. Both could loom in the post. It'd be fire. Going back to
Both
Johnson,
really
listen,
good passers too.
and that
Yep.
yes, depth passes for their
Which
position.
we in this context we have Steph Curry, we have DeRozan
Yep.
having two additional like plus passers in the front court would further enable players like Steph and DeRozan to get easier shots.
100%. And yeah, imagine just the boards that would be gobbled up. Like it would be something nasty. So I agree with
See,
you
I knew
there.
you'd make DeRozan's early field goal percentage stuff a positive.
You knew I would. You knew I would. It's how I have to spin it, man. But listen, as far as Johnson, he averaged 16 points per game on 50% shooting, shot 41% from three, really came in with the pedigree of being a great shooter. Just that's what he was kind of billed as. However, the knocks on him even back then, he was already 23, which on the
Yep.
developmental curve, he was who he was, and as we saw through his career, he was who he was. He also had very shaky ball handling and passing skills, which remained that way throughout the duration of his career. And he offered little in the way of development, especially when you consider that Cousins was selected one pick after. So I know we have
Yeah.
Cousins there, but I want to get your take on other options that you liked over in
Yeah.
that 2010 fourth pick.
Well, like I also so Wesley Johnson, I will say I disagree with the concept that a player who is like over 20 is who they are. Like that's not accurate. I know I am way different just from myself 2 years ago than I'd imagine. Steve Nash didn't win MVPs until his like 30, I think, age
Yeah,
30.
age
So
30 and
like
31.
we've seen DeRozan. It took DeRozan, our own sixth pick, quite a long time to develop to the point where he was the all NBA player that he is.
24, which
Right?
you were already going to get a Wesley Johnson at, though.
I'm just
But
saying
I know.
I push back against that cognitive bias in basketball evaluation of like this player is who they are already. I don't believe in that. That said, his big claim to fame as a prospect in that draft class was the 3-point shooting and his defensive impact. The problem
Mhm.
is he went to college at Syracuse.
Yep.
Syracuse runs a very particular defensive system that tends to bolster people's defensive counting stats, which can make them appear to be better defenders than they actually are.
Mm.
And like you mentioned, he didn't really have a handle. He wasn't really going to be somebody who could even necessarily consistently attack a closeout and maintain or expand upon an advantage. And with our team that we have in Steph, DeRozan, Love, you want people who can build upon and expand an advantage instead of just catching and shooting. So I did want to give Wes Johnson and that bias some discussion, but
Mhm.
like
Oh, I
DeMarcus
uh-huh.
Cousins, I think is the clear talent there. I remember at the time talking with people in Vegas at Summer League and talking about how like I thought DeMarcus Cousins was a better talent than John Wall. Um, and the other obvious guys, especially if you are looking for wing help are Gordon Hayward and Paul George. And at the time, Paul George still seemed not raw, but he seemed a little less baked, if you will, than
Mhm.
like Wesley Johnson or Gordon Hayward. So I think at that point in time, my board probably would have been DeMarcus Cousins, Hayward, George
I
for
like
the
that.
fourth pick. Yeah,
I like that. I went just opposite. I did Cousins, George, Hayward, but same thing. We're
fair enough. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
close. You really couldn't kind of cut it. And also, I have to agree with you on that, especially when you talked about age and how that isn't exactly accurate. Line of demarcation for a prospect. I found myself debating that when it came to Chris Duarte a few drafts
Yeah,
ago,
yeah,
in terms of
exactly.
how I look at him. So in this case, I meant that was a concern going in, one that ended up being
It's
confirmed
true.
by
It, it
his
it did
specific
happen. It
case.
did happen with him. That is
Yeah,
true.
but no.
But
I
yeah,
definitely.
yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you brought out because I didn't mean to lay
And I
that
know,
as
I
a
know.
main. And it's good for a basketball discourse
Yeah,
philosophy type of understanding that hey, people change. Skill sets change. You get guys like Kevin Love who were not 3-point shooters at all. DeMarcus Cousins, same thing. Who grew that? Brooke Lopez. How
Kevin
many years did
Love.
it take Brooke Lopez to become
Yeah,
the sharpshooter he is now?
Kevin Love, when he was drafted, there were literally memes and jokes of him being the Pillsbury Doughboy. And then we've now seen Kevin Love being a cover athlete for like SI's body issue, or was it ESPN's body issue?
It was
Like
ESPN, but yeah.
like the dude people change.
Mm-hmm.
And when you like, I think the issue is like using heuristics like that as a set standard. Like, for example, players under 6 feet almost never turn out. That doesn't necessarily mean that this player won't buck that trend, you know? And I think sometimes, and I'm not saying you, I'm just saying general consensus.
Yeah.
A lot of the discourse around the draft is like, oh, he's a junior, or is it like Desmond Bain, who clearly heading into that draft should have been selected much higher,
Mm-hmm.
what like fell to 30th because teams were like, yeah, but he is who he is. He's old. And it's like he's not even old. He
He's not even
just
old.
barely started drinking if he wanted to. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that, and you know what? There's gonna be another. We're gonna have to do, like you said, more of
Yeah.
a piece on that soon because I do like these philosophies, especially when it comes to the draft. But no,
Mhm.
very good point to bring out here for sure. So, kind of looking at that, it's kind of cut and dry on our fourth pick. Cousins, Hayward,
Yeah.
George, some in the area, however, fell to us. So then with the 23rd pick, it turned out that Kahn selected Trevor Booker with that pick. Then he would trade Booker and Hamidi Ndai to the Wizards for Lazar Hayward and Nemanja Bjelica. Hayward didn't last past his rookie contract, and then Bjelica didn't join Minnesota until well after Khan was gone. But
Hmm.
any options that you like personally for that 23rd pick? Are you making that a priority to trade up for assets? Are you shopping that pick? I know in one of my simulations I did, I shopped that pick with Kevin Love to see what I could get. I'm getting Carmelo, but that was just my own. Did I take that deal? You
I know.
bet
I
your
know.
bottom dollar I did, but that's not the point. Um, again, it was just me going off there.
Yeah.
But did you like anyone at 23rd? Now, mind you, this is a spot where, like I
Uh,
said, you
y-
know.
yeah. So like this class, I don't think there was a whole lot of like there were a couple of solid players
Hmm.
who would go on to be potentially helpful players. Obviously, the most notable guy is Jeremy Lin, who went undrafted. But also, even if we did, and I did like Jeremy Lin going into that draft, I didn't obviously expect Linsanity or anything like that. But
Hmm.
um, we already have Steph Curry. Um, we probably have a veteran backup point guard. Um,
Yeah,
Lynn
we still
might
had
be a
Sebastian Soffer.
consideration. Other players I liked at the time who wound up going in the second round. Landry Fields. I liked Landry Fields. I also actually really like Jarvis Varnado, who at the time when he completed his college career was actually the like leader in blocks in college history. So I thought he was like an interesting prospect. But ultimately, I think I would probably again we have a really young team. We just traded Al Jefferson to get subsequent future picks. Um, I don't think we can realistically trade up to try to get Hayward or George as well. So I would probably look to convert that pick into future draft capital or see if there was a veteran who could come in and be like a 3-and-D veteran or somebody who could come in and back up Boogie and Love.
Yeah, I get you on that. I think for me it was interesting because like I said, saw the options available and were like, nope, we're trading that pick. But I mean, if I had to like rank my candidates in order, I like a bigger kind of wing with some balls, the distribution skills, and Lance Stevenson. Kind of out there, but you know what you get with him. Jeremy Lin was the guy I have. Ironically, Nemanja Bjelica, I still think was
I like
nice.
Belitza.
You know, a
And,
guy who
and
could
Belitza
shoot, good
would be a
playmaking.
good backup to Love. Have a very stylistically similar kind of like
Yep.
can space, can move the ball well. Yeah, yeah.
Yep, so I would have done that. And then last but not least, a guy to come off the bench, another big, yes, but a guy who's a project will take a couple years anyway, Hassan Whiteside. I like the fact that again, you need a backup big. You're not going to
Which
play,
oddly,
Love
that's
and
exactly what Sacramento did. they took DeMarcus Cousins, and then they took Hassan Whiteside in
Mm-hmm.
the second. Yeah, yeah.
In the second, yeah. In this case, knowing that hey, he's going to be a project, which I thought the Kings knew then, but the Kings going to do the Kings. But bottom line, over 10 years, 12 points, 10 boards. We saw what he did, at the peak of his powers in 2014 or 2015, 2016. Not bad to have that as a weapon off the bench, and then kind of see what happens later. But with that, going to the 45th pick, I only had one candidate, Josh. I did like him, Jeremy Evans. He played 7 years in the NBA. Nice bouncy, pick and roll big.
Dunk contest, dude. Yep.
Exactly. I think he would
Did he
definitely
win one?
benefit. I think he did. Yes.
Okay, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to remember when. I'm gonna look it up right now.
I
But
definitely remember him competing in a couple of them, but I couldn't quite remember if he won one.
yeah, I feel like he did.
I think he did, yeah.
Yeah, oh, he's 34. Wow, time just flies with these guys. But anyway, but no, a guy like I said who could definitely make some plays in space. He won the 2012 slam dunk contest. So there we go.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that would be my thing at at the 45th pick. After that, yeah, I would probably just trade. There was no one else there of note. That I could trade to get a late, future pick. Let's do that. Like I said, I'm a sucker in my simulation games of attaching that pick with the player I kind of want to get rid of to see if that helps juice up the package.
That's fair.
So,
There are also several young players on the roster that at least I wasn't super fond of. Like I probably would have seen what packaging some of these picks alongside players like Corey Brewer, Craig Smith, Ryan Gomes, and Sebastian Telfair might get us. Obviously, that's beyond our speculation to see like, oh yeah, they could have gotten this type of thing, but anyway.
all right, so to kind of summarize the 2010 draft, we walk out with DeMarcus Cousins. We end up trading the 23rd pick for future assets there, and then we also snag Jeremy Lin, kind of backup point guard insurance, nice guy to grab. So we have those guys. We do indeed, of course, move off of Al Jefferson, as we talked about, to really make room for that Cousins Cousins love front court. So I was trying to make it kind of cool.
Love Cousins. Either way, I think it sounds. We both know what it's hinting at.
There we go.
A
there
very
we go.
Arrested Development type situation.
I was purposely trying to be. You're like, we know we're both hinting at. Yep, a lethal front court, but no, also.
That too, obviously.
Absolutely. But moving on in real time, during this, right after this draft is right when you get the signing of Darko Milicic. I just want to bring that out. An offer he couldn't refuse, 4 years, $20 million with a partial guarantee on the fourth year. I just want to read the quote he put in the aftermath of making this move. Okay, just for your listening pleasure, Josh, and listeners, of course. Darko. We play Darko. Kurt Rambis and Dave Wohl both were big proponents of making the trade. Once we obtained Darko, I could see what they were talking about. Darko has enormous skills. Both Kurt and Bill Laimbeer played the big man position in the league, and they felt that if it ever worked out for him psychologically, he could be one of the top 3 or 4 centers in the league. And again, the risk point was quite low when we made the trade, and even the contract that we're referring to that we gave him,
contract. Yeah,
that many talked about, was really no more than a backup center gets in our leagues these days, about $4 million a year, so 0.4 for Kahn. We didn't pay him as a starting center, even though we had him ticketed as our starting center. So I think there were some reasons to do it, and I recognize those reasons even today. One of the things I wish we'd done a better job of there was, I only learned after he left, I think there's some family pressures. He had so many visitors, so many family members there at times. There's a lot of pressure and stress in his life that maybe would have helped him to overcome. Now, granted, in the future, Darko has spoken out about, some of the oversized expectations and the mental toll it took on him. It's very serious, something very important, and how, he tried to channel that through kickboxing and other things, and it was really cool for him to do that, and I'm glad he's able to find peace, outside of the NBA and still be financially compensated for his career. That's great. With that being said, I think some of what Tom was saying, top 3 to 4 centers in the league, that wasn't there when he was drafted. That was never, at any point in his career, where you're looking at Darko Milicic, you go, okay, we have Dwight Howard, we got Joakim Noah. We got to put Darko Milicic up there. Like that was Mark
Yep.
the Gasols, exactly. I'm sorry, Al Horford. Up and
Timmy.
down the list, Tim Duncan. You could even throw Andrew Bynum in there. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
Nene, I put over. Like, there's so
Yeah,
many
yeah.
bigs up and
Emeka
down the league.
Okafor. Yeah.
There you go. Right,
um,
Kevin Garnett was. Anyway,
Marcin
we go down the
Gortat.
list. We're top.
Yeah. But
Shaq's still around.
the funny thing is, Kahn might be right if we were talking against no one workout, which is why Joe Dumars drafted Darko number
2
2, is
phones.
because, Darko looked really good in an empty gym.
Listen, when you have the chance to be in an empty gym and you see someone shoot the leather off the ball, you gotta take it. I don't really care who you are unless you happen to be an actual NBA player.
It is
But
what it is. It is what it is.
there it is. True words were never said. No, but that was true. And now we go into our second pick, the one we're going to talk about right now. On July 12th, I thought this was a very smart move, but of course, I'm heavily biased.
It is a
Kahn,
good value move. For
good
sure.
value move. There we go. Kahn sent a 2012 second round pick that later became Bojan Bogdanovic, as well as a 2014 second rounder that became Markel Brown, along with cash to Miami in exchange for the talented but inconsistent Michael Beasley. And little background, we have to remember Beasley, former second round overall pick out of Kansas in 2008, had an amazing college career up to this point in the trade, and I guess you could say afterward, had been rather underwhelming in the NBA. He struggled particularly to be a second option to Dwayne Wade. Even so, he had come off a season averaging 17.9 points per game and 7.7 rebounds. And if you're wondering why a guy like Beasley, who just short of a double-double at age 21, is being moved like that, the Heat had just acquired both LeBron James and Chris Bosh, and they're in the process of shedding salary to kind of make that happen.
Had they already, or was Beasley moving the precursor?
That they were in the process of that.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. Beasley,
I feel like
had
it was one of
to
those
go.
shady areas where they
Beasley
had done
had
it
to go to
make
that.
it. Yeah, exactly. I almost feel like they brought him first, and then but the point they got him out. Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
And so Kahn, you have the opportunity to grab a young prospect in Beasley at a low price point when you're operating
Only
just under the salary cap.
Only 21, 22 at the time. Yeah,
21 at the time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and
Oh,
the interesting thing about Beasley to me is he falls prey to the same situation that happened to Carmelo and happened to players like Joe Alexander and a couple others, which I call I call the the college 4 to NBA 3 problem, which is and obviously it works perfectly fine for Melo because Melo is one of the most skilled scorers we've seen in terms of breadth of how he can score. But Melo also was a much better rebounder and defender in college, right? Well, you switch a college 4 to an NBA 3, and one, you're shifting them further out to the perimeter. So when they initiate their offense in college against college 4s, mind you, they have that quickness advantage. They have the handle advantage. When you shift it to the NBA and going against wing defenders, that quickness and that handle advantage shortens a little. On top of it, they're starting their actions further out. So instead of starting in like the mid post and then any actions get them closer to the rim, like a rim finish or a floater range pull up, now you're talking about starting out at like the 3-point line, and then they wind up closer to mid range if they do take a pull up. So you can see how that automatically impacts their efficiency. On top of it, you're moving them further away from rebounding positioning, both offensively and defensively, because you're slotting them at the 3. So they have to defend generally players on the perimeter. So you see the rebounding of play and the efficiency of players in college like Beasley, like Carmelo, like Joe Alexander go down when they transition to the NBA because they're slotted in as wings. And so that's why Beasley was an amazing college player and obviously had a lot of potential, and for a variety of reasons, and I won't absolve him of any blame, but for a variety of reasons that didn't play out on the NBA level.
absolutely. That was a great breakdown of the foibles that not only came to kind of define Beasley's kind of inconsistencies on the court, but also others. You mentioned Joe Alexander back in 2008. You mentioned Carmelo Anthony back in 2003. Both those guys having an adjustment to varying degrees. I think if Joe Alexander's on the one end of the spectrum and Carmelo's on the other, Beasley's in the middle.
Yep.
Kind of in that tweener status. He almost found himself a nice role there, but couldn't quite secure it because, again, kind of where he was in terms of his issues, like you described. So no need to go into that. But the question we do have to go into is whether we make that same move here today, Josh.
So at this point, we have Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Love, and DeMarcus Cousins.
And, sorry, real quick, the next day, Al Jefferson is gone. So,
yeah, well, in real
ours,
life,
we've already
in ours, we've already moved off Al Jefferson before the selection of DeMarcus Cousins. Yeah,
we need a three.
So there is clearly a spot on the wing that we'd need help with, but we already have DeRozan, DeMarcus Cousins, Kevin Love, and Steph. That is a lot of usage already.
True.
Beasley, at his best, is a shot hunter, and Beasley's not going to get that opportunity with our team as currently constructed. Is it an amazing value play? Yes. Getting a player of Beasley's caliber, only 2 years in the NBA so far, relatively inexpensive, and you only have to give up 2 future seconds. Amazing value play. Would he be even Miami level Beasley on our team without taking DeRozan's development down, without taking shots away from Steph, Boogie, and K-Love?
You make an excellent point.
This is why we work so well, man, because we balance each other out.
This is true. No, I do like it. You're right. It comes together.
Lay it on us why we should add Beasley and just go whole hog offense.
I'm always a fan of that. I am. But it's not even that in this way. I think that from basketball fit, it makes perfect sense. It's like my high school career all over again. We had a stacked offensive five, and I was a small forward who liked playing out the left side. But our center also got brought out the left side. I was a decent enough shooter, but I needed to have the ball. I needed to have the ball in my hands to really kind of get that going. And so I asked my coach, can I come off the bench? And we had a coaching philosophical difference. Bottom line, I wasn't able to come to the bench. I don't think I was effective as I could have been. But with Beasley, looking at this roster, our starting five looks great. But if we're looking at barring any other moves we still have a pretty sad rotation outside of that, where you still have, looking at a Corey Brewer, a Sebastian Telfair, a Bobby Brown, the artist formerly known as Mark Madsen. These guys are still here with their contracts that don't expire until this upcoming season that we're currently in. So if I'm looking at Beasley, I'm saying, hey, we grab him. He plays the three, but we take him out early. Let's say we bring in Rodney Carney or Rashad McCants or something, Corey Brewer. And then we play through Beasley in the second unit as the offensive fulcrum there.
So throwing this out there as co-GMs discussing Miami, we've had the talks with Miami. Mm-hmm. Do you believe Beasley 2 years into his NBA career, off of a fantastic college season, do you think Beasley could be talked into essentially being our sixth man?
I think given where Beasley was in his career, mind you, he had a very good statistical numbers kind of season, but part of the reason he was even in play, he was still trying to figure out his role as a B-star to Dwayne Wade. If you look at the numbers that he had in Miami there, while, yes, certainly solid, you could tell that he had several games, he had his sweet spot in scoring. He had 21 games where he was between 20 and 29 points. He had 38 games where he was between 10 and 19 points. That doesn't exactly scream, 20% usage in that way. You know what I mean? That screams more of a guy who you're trying to find your footing. Only one game did he score over 30 points. And he had 9 games where he had 18 games rather, where he was between 0 and 9 points a game. So you're looking at a guy who is really tapping out between 10 and 18 points, which is great. But it's not consistent in that way just yet. He's not the super scorer that he would become in the NBA. We saw his smooth game in college. We're in that adjustment period now. I think we can sell a guy on, hey, you're going to get your shots and your time to kind of carry the offense around you in our newfound offensive attack, where when you come off the bench, you're going to spell Kevin Love, or DeMarcus Cousins slides you up to the 4, go a little smaller, bring in another shooter off the bench, Curry, Beasley pick and rolls. I don't know, like something like that, where he's more of a play finisher and not the guy that you dump the ball down to create your own offense, because Miami thought that was the case and that was not.
I do like the idea. It comes down to, would Beasley accept being our sixth man? Because that's going to be the cleanest role for him. And if he's a little hesitant at being the sixth man, if he would prefer to be the starter and then subbed out and then like be the primary guy with the initial bench unit, would he be okay with probably being the fourth or fifth option in our starting lineup? Or do you hinder DeRozan's development and shift him to fourth or fifth option?
Well,
or do you take Kevin Love, who's been blossoming this entire time and putting up crazy numbers, and we tell him like, yo, bro, you got to take a step back?
No, absolutely not. I think either DeRozan, depending on how he is blossoming, is going to continue to get that role, and we try to sell Beasley on that, or we take the asset play in terms of getting a guy like that cost controlled for little to nothing and parlay him over for a better fit.
Yeah, or see if we can get a first
exactly
out of having Beasley. Something that they kind of did with Quentin Richardson. They had acquired Quentin Richardson and then like within a month or two traded him out again.
Had him out. Exactly.
Yeah, like ultimately I think we do this deal because it is a very like valuable deal in terms of like we're only giving up 2 seconds to get a player who could, assuming he buys in, we just got like a really good 6 man. Or even if he doesn't buy in, here's a guy that, he's only 21, 22. We could subsequently see what we could get for him. So like, yeah, I think we would do that deal. I just like talking about the philosophical side of these things with you because I know Beasley's on your pyramid or like your 5 your phone. He's on your phone, isn't he? He's on your like screen.
He still is. Yep. He still is, and he's somebody like you said. I'm even understanding how Beasley's career has gone and trying to see where it could have went wrong. You illustrate an excellent point. I don't know. For the first time, I can't really make a good argument that it could fit with the roster as constructed. Beasley was a guy who, when he wasn't getting the ball enough, we saw him play, not even on stacked teams like LA. He really struggled to find a fit. He was really good on teams that really didn't have an option offensively. Like he could be the main guy. And
like the Timberwolves, the first season with the Timberwolves.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah,
averaged like 19.
Exactly. Like, yeah. And then he had a moment where he regressed. Remember, went to Phoenix. Yep. And it was a big thing between Lance Blanks and Ron Babby about making him a key part of that Suns team. And he averaged 10 points a game. Yep. And then he would go back. So, you're going on the roller coaster that is Beasley. And it is just that. But at the end of the day, I really think that the like you said, that value point for that player with that offer, you have to do. And then worst case scenario, the Heat were not operating out of a position of strength. They kind of had what they had. They need to get rid of salary. Yeah, they could have pressed a hard bargain, but no, we're trying to get LeBron James and Chris Bosh, and because they were doing this in advance, the time was now to strike to get that money off their books.
Yep.
So Minnesota, listen, we're going to win sub 25 games. We got a young, talented guy who could juice it all up. Maybe we win more with the roster we're constructing, but at the end of the day, we have this guy. He's good. We're going to get a first for him. He's only 21. Sell again. Maybe I'm looking at Phoenix. Some is your building block as you transition from a post Steve Nash future. A post Steve Nash landscape. I don't know. You try to make a play, and worst case scenario, get something back more significant in return. But yeah, that was a nice discussion. I'm glad. I love that we're able to do these like little nuggets because I really think it's interesting to like flex that part of the brain. But going in, so the Wolves in general, 2011, they were part of the Carmelo Anthony trade. Nothing really a whole lot to report there. They traded Corey Brewer and Costa Kufis,
I think they got
uh, and they got back.
Anthony Randolph,
Yep.
right, and
And
Eddie
Eddie
Curry.
Curry in
Yeah,
cash. And then Curry was almost immediately bye.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that happened. I actually liked Anthony Randolph on the Wolves. I thought he had like a Jaden McDaniels
Anthony
type thing for
Randolph
me.
was interesting. He was very much one of those like tantalizing prospects that everyone can kind of project. He was the Mary Sue. Everyone likes to talk about like Bella and Twilight, which those
Mm-hmm.
books suck. Never read them. I've never read them, but I had a friend's girlfriend explain it to me. I was like, what in the? But anyway, like Anthony Randolph was like one of those blank slates that like people could project onto him what like, oh man, with his physical skills and his size and his length, like, oh, all the possibilities. And of course, like it never really panned out
hmm
the way that most people felt.
I feel like the Wolves are doing that right now with Jaden McDaniels.
It's possible, yeah.
Like I like Jaden McDaniels. I'm not saying that he isn't, but oh my gosh, like he could be the next, this guy. I mean, to a lesser extent of
And he
like
could be, it's
and he could
possible,
same way
but
that same way
yes.
that he could have been. Except
Mhm.
we know now that Randolph wasn't. But
Yes.
that pre-hype, look at the physical
Mhm.
profile, look at the skill set that can still be explored, a little bit of
Mhm.
outside shooting, a little bit of vertical athleticism, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I agree with you completely. Great guy to play with in 2K, I'll tell you that. Him,
Yes, he
Beasley,
was
Williams,
fun
I
in
had fun.
2K. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, he
yeah,
was. So that was cool. But we gotta go to the draft now,
yeah.
2011. Listen, nice class of talents. You had a Kyrie Irving, you had a Brandon Knight, you had a Kemba Walker. I'm not forgetting you had a major guy in Clay Thompson. You had a major guy in Kawhi Leonard. You had all these
Mhm.
guys in there. You had the immortal
Shit,
Jimmer Fredette.
Vucevic. Vucevic wound up being a really good player.
Exactly. Jimmer, I got to bring him up again because he's so nice. I got to say it
Jimmy.
twice. Jimmy
Jimmer.
Bucket.
Here's the crazy thing. Jimmer went 10th. Jimmy Butler went 30th.
That's hilarious. But the BYU buzz on
Oh
Jimmer
yes.
was something crazy. I mean, even when I watched him, I was like, "Wow, he's nice." I didn't see like anything crazy. Like we look at Curry, like that's insane. I saw you for that. I saw juiced up JJ Redick in terms of like
Yep.
the types of shots he was getting,
Oh
not the
yeah.
archetype of a player, but just okay, really good. Spot up shooting, really good pull up shooting. But like it was they were reacting. It felt like to Jimmer the way that Curry we react to at the time.
Yes. It was another interesting thing tied to Jimmer. Two things. One, Jimmer got outplayed and lost minutes to the 60th pick, Isaiah Thomas. Um,
That's funny.
but the interesting thing about Jimmer is it's tied to what I call strengths that aren't necessarily strengths. Similar
hmm
thing with like weaknesses. And in evaluating Jimmer's transition to the NBA, you have to ask yourself, like, yes, these are his strengths. Like he is an elite shooter. He can create space, has a quick release, all that sort of stuff, can shoot in all the different ways. Is an NBA team going to build their entire offense around Jimmer like it was at BYU? Because if they are not, Jimmer's draft, like his evaluation has to reflect that too. If Jimmer goes from getting like, 15 plus shots per game to Jimmer's going to get like 8 to 10, that changes
hmm
drastically the type of player he projects to be and his likely impact on an NBA team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that you're not going to find many teams, the Kings certainly weren't one of them, that were willing to say, okay, you know what? The floor is yours. We're going to remake this team around you, a la,
Boogie would never have let that happen.
no, that was not going to be exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
You're going to be our Allen Iverson, and we're going to be the 2001 six. No, it's not. That's
Yep.
not how it was. So I definitely agree with you there for sure. I guess now we go into Derek Williams. Derek Williams, 6'8",
Yep.
241. Rose to national attention in his sophomore year, averaged 19.5 points, 8.3 rebounds, was second team All America. And Kahn was enamored with him, very much like I was. Kahn thought that the fit could work. Add more youth, add more athleticism. Why not? Kevin Love a power forward, okay. Michael be a small forward, all right. And we'll add Williams there too. Unfortunately, what could go wrong, right? Williams more comfortable playing power forward, was kind of miscast at the three with his specific skill set. Wasn't that good enough a shooter to be a three. Undersized 6'8" to fully play the four. Wasn't made the most use of his athleticism at the three, and was too undersized to do it at the four. Couldn't play the five at all. With the skill set that he had. Maybe nowadays you spin it into a weird kind of five role. He wasn't the best defensively at all either. So that's also an issue. Joining another front court core of players who are not the best defensively. So you have all that. And we know that Williams only go on to average 10 points and 5 boards in his 3 seasons with Minnesota. So I want to get your thoughts on Williams, and then we will kind of go and look at who we will actually draft a second round
Yes.
pick,
So
second overall pick.
I also really thought he was a really interesting and high quality prospect heading into that draft class. He shot like an insane 56.8% from three in his sophomore season. The problem is he shot a total of 93s in his college career. So yes, he hit them at an insane rate in his sophomore year. Super athletic, all that sort of stuff. But
Big butt.
is that more a case of like this is legit? He is going to be an elite level 3-point shooter on the NBA level, or is this like boosted by randomness and that sort of thing? And then on top of it, you already kind of alluded to this. Kevin Love's your four. Beasley's your three. What is Williams supposed to do if he's not going to get a lot of looks at the three or the four? Do you slide Beasley up to the two and then have Williams at the three, which again, defensively, that's going to be a terror show for your team, not the opponents. And then, Beasley at the two just unlocks even more of the, like, I don't want to say selfishness, but that type of like, oh, okay, I have the green light. I'm the two. I've kind of the green light to shoot even more than I did at the three. And Williams also suffers from the college four to NBA three transition of everything we talked about before. Has the athleticism advantage, has the quickness advantage, has a handle advantage against college fours. Put him on the NBA, shift him to the three, and all of a sudden he's going against defenders who make you need a lot tighter handle, even more quickness, a little more shiftiness to your game. And I think if you have Kevin Love and you have Michael Beasley, and admittedly we're in a different context where ideally we have Beasley as our sixth man, or we've moved him for a first or something. Williams still remains an intriguing candidate, but we know we have Love locked in at the four. And if we do have Beasley, we have Beasley soaking up minutes at the four behind Love and soaking up some minutes at the three too. Do the odds of Derek Williams reaching his potential heights, do they make sense for this Timberwolves team where, again, even if he comes in and we make him the starter at the three, we have defensive issues. He's still probably going to be the fourth or fifth option at best on offense. Like, does Derek Williams become Arizona Derek Williams on the NBA level with the Minnesota Timberwolves context?
I think if he's somebody that really, again, of all the guys we've talked about in the David Kahn era, like depending on where he is slotted draft wise and fit wise with the expectations put on him, he could have been a offensively talented small ball four.
Yeah.
Or offensive talented small ball five
Yes.
in today's NBA.
Yes.
But even if he's on another team, maybe they find a role for him like that. I mean, he didn't come that far out before the Steph Curry switch everything small ball revolution that happened in 2015. So all we need to do is have him on a team where he would find that role sooner. Let's say late in the first or whatever the case may be. And I think that you're right. Like his success swings heavily on that because you look at him as a savior or something at number two, you're gonna be just horribly disappointed. Look at someone who has like a nice kind of scoring package off the bench, run the wing, shoot some threes, play some defense, fill some gaps. Then you have something different. Now, maybe his defense struggles are still too much. Maybe he's not enough of a shooter to justify him playing on the perimeter, and he just doesn't have the bag inside to be that guy. It's possible that he still flames out as a tweener that just didn't have it where he needed it. But you're in a much better position if you do it that way. And I agree with you there. I just think, I thought he was definitely worthy of going number two back then. I remember being
Yeah.
very invested in Derek Williams. It kind of was the consensus back then. Hindsight being 2020, though, no. Like, he definitely would not be going second overall in anyone's draft unless, you're just trying to do it again. But I do think that you do have a case for him, maybe in that 20th pick, you know,
Yeah.
uh, even the
Assuming
31st.
assuming he would still be available, but yeah.
Exactly, because that's what I mean. In that draft, he would still be picked, not second, but I don't know if he lingers until 20. Like, he was still a decent player. The skill was tantalizing. Like you said, he kind of had the same kind of Wes Johnson. Wes shot more threes, but this astronomical shooting percentage for a guy who ended up being, about league average to middling shooter at best. But college inflated those numbers in a way because he was really on a torrid streak. 50% of anything is really good as long as it's not a math test. And, just for him to do that, like, really solid. But yeah, I guess looking at that, and I'm glad we gave Derek Williams some time there for sure.
Yes, yeah.
You look at this 2011 draft class, assuming number one Kawhi comes off the board easy, which
Yes,
isn't, it's there. Kyrie's still
Yeah.
nice. I think Kawhi goes off easy though. You have, let's say Kawhi's gone. You have Klay Thompson. You have Kyrie Irving, Jimmy Butler. Even scrolling down. Those are the three for me. I think after that, it's a next step down for sure. But out of those three, how do you have your ranking ordered?
Yeah, so given the context of we have Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Love, DeMarcus Cousins, and presumably Michael Beasley as kind of our core at the moment. Kyrie doesn't make sense even if he's on the board for us. Like Kyrie and Steph, that's not Kyrie, Steph, DeRozan, Love is not going to work defensively whatsoever. Like,
no, but think of the offense.
dude, do you want to go the what was it? Was it Westfall who had the Nuggets playing like at the fastest pace, but they were also giving up like 120 points a game or something like that?
I got Don Nelson as my coach. That's exactly the way I want to go. But
of course you would say yes to this. No, I think it's obvious. Like, and again, who takes a step back? Who shifts from third option to fourth option? Who shifts from fourth to fifth, etc. Like, we already have a lot of mouths to feed. Kyrie wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. And honestly, like for the reasons we enumerated earlier, like Derek Williams doesn't really make sense for us because he's not going to be Arizona Derek Williams for our team. So to me, the obvious guys, and I love Klay Thompson. I adore Klay Thompson, and I'm sounding like Stephen A. Smith. Like he is a close personal friend. The obvious two are Kawhi and Jimmy. Even at that point in time, they were known as like high level defensive prospects, and our biggest hole with our current core is defense. And both Jimmy and Kawhi, obviously, we've known what they've grown into. That's future bias and everything. We know what they're capable of. But at the moment, we need somebody who's willing to accept a fourth or fifth option on offense too, and still bring outsized impact to our team. And the likeliest candidates are going to be Kawhi, Jimmy, and Klay.
Sure. Tanguay and Gumbo too. No, I'm playing.
Yes, that goes without saying, but you can't take him. You can't take him second because you can't take him in the draft.
No, absolutely not. So looking at that, I agree with you completely. I actually had, for what it's worth, Kyrie second because of course just talent wise, I'm like, yo, listen, and I get it.
It would never work, but yes, yeah.
Exactly. It's one of those, it would only work in games, but it would be so nice, at least offensively. But that's not the point. Going to what we're talking about here on what makes sense on building a roster, it comes down to me between Klay Thompson and Jimmy Butler. And to be honest, it's not really much of a decision because up until Klay Thompson's unfortunate injuries over the last 2 years, Klay Thompson's more durable. Klay Thompson's a better fit. Klay Thompson came in already with the pedigree of being one of the best shooters in the draft. And I mean, obviously one of the best shooters in NBA history now. So there's a thing there. And Jimmy Butler, I mean, as much as he has improved and has an uncanny knack for raising the level of play in the playoffs and games where needed most, he's also gonna miss at minimum 15, 20 games. He's only played 70 games in a season twice in his NBA career. Once with the Bulls, and I want to say, I think both are with the Bulls.
Yeah.
I think
Also,
both are with the Bulls.
just throwing this out there, we know Boogie's kind of personality. How stable is our team if we have Boogie and Jimmy's personalities?
That is true.
Like
That is true.
and if like knowing like Steph, it probably takes precedent over both of those guys, at least at the beginning. Kevin Love probably takes precedent over both of those guys, at least at the beginning. Are Jimmy Butler and Boogie, given everything we know about them, not going to have some issues being like third options at best?
I think eventually they might
Eventually,
be.
yes.
Remember,
Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Butler coming in originally didn't even come to his own until about, 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
Once that happened, though, then he did indeed start clashing with teammates and coaches and got traded. But for him to come in at 2011, just being a defensive stopper up until his fourth season, I mean, it's almost like when you talked about players breaking out and developing. You have a 4-year window of Butler. Is it worth it? For me, no. Especially not promise health and his offensive game, particularly his shooting, which was always still a kind of sketchy mark, didn't really come into his own till that time. So while you have someone who has potential, the odds of you realizing that is not high. Whereas if I get someone like Klay Thompson, who not only is a very good shooter, a very solid defender, but also has a lack of reliance on athleticism, yeah, I'm gonna take that guy. I think he can play the two. I think he can swing up to the three in the system here. Um, it kind of gives some more balance to this roster. A guy who doesn't need the ball like that, but also when he gets it, will connect at a high clip.
Yeah, I think the clear answer to me is Kawhi. With
Oh, absolutely. If he was
Being
there.
like second over Jimmy, like you said, I agree. I also think Kawhi and Klay, especially coming in, would be okay with their roles. Like I don't feel like there would be, like, obviously they're both hard workers and they both would expect more of their careers down the line, but I don't think either of them would cause any problems, and I don't think rookie Jimmy Butler would either. But I think given what we already had, Kawhi and then Klay and then Jimmy would make the most sense.
I'm with it. Totally understand. That makes a lot of sense there too. Yeah, if Kawhi was available, I assume Kawhi was off the board at number one. So,
Well, I'm imagining, like, since this isn't a redraft, this would still be the same context at the time. I imagine Kyrie's the one who goes number one to the Cavs still, and then we get the first pick of everyone else.
and with that being said,
in
yeah,
that
Kawhi.
context, we'd probably get ripped to shreds for taking Kawhi second. But I'm also a big proponent of not trading down unless you know for a fact your guy is going to be there. And we couldn't 100% be certain. In hindsight, we'd know we could trade down, but in hindsight, everything is clearer. But we'd also have the 20th pick. Anybody pop in mind specifically at that 20th pick besides Jimmy, who we mentioned before?
Yeah, Jimmy pops out. I have Derek Williams, but then I slotted him more through the 31st. I think he can fall further down than 20th when we're looking at it. You also have the Morris twins. Now, mind you, they did go a little bit higher than projected.
Yeah, they went
13, I think it was like 12th and 13th or 13th. There you go, 14th.
13, 14.
But I like Reggie Jackson as well. Also Brandon Knight. Again, we have our guard situation set up, but we don't have our backup point guard situation set up. I think both those guys would work well. I have a little more confidence in Reggie Jackson. Both guys had spotty health. But Brandon Knight comes with the reputation of being a shooter. Reggie Jackson, though, has helmed his own team and I thought did a pretty decent job. Brandon Knight has done the same, but I like Reggie Jackson, especially, Big Government. Come on, it's a great nickname. So I would look at Reggie Jackson or Brandon Knight. But also, and this is another one that I'm leery of leaning into the front court again with
Hmm.
all the guys we already have here. But again, the skill set is just different enough that I might like it with some intriguing playmaking skills. That would be Chandler Parsons.
Yeah. So I'm coming at it from the perspective of like it be essentially the same draft order for the most part, just changed where the players we pick and that sort of thing. So like I imagine the Morrises would still be off the board. Um, Reggie would still be on the board. Jimmy would still be on the board. I think there's some interesting guy, and this comes back to what do we do with Beasley, right? Like, do we plan on keeping Beasley and operating as our sixth man? And especially if we're taking somebody like Kawhi, Clay, or Jimmy, like that further eats into Beasley's like playing time and role. Um, if we move Beasley for a future pick, might we look at somebody like a Chandler Parsons or a Nikola Mirotic or even like a Kenneth Faried who can be in our big rotation, who can do some of the things at least that Love can, like particularly Parsons and Mirotic can fulfill some of the shooting. Parsons also has some of that passing ability. Fareed's gonna make sure that we have 48 minutes of high level rebounding. Like I think obviously you know Jimmy and Reggie make sense to have high on the board there too. And even if we just drafted Kawhi, if we do move off Beasley, having Jimmy also, we have two high quality defensive prospects on the wing right now. And given how we slot in DeRozan's minutes and his rotation in terms of like when he's playing alongside Steph and so forth, I think we can fit minutes for Jimmy and Kawhi. Um, so like it's an interesting question with that 20th pick. And I'm not sure exactly where I lean because, having a quality backup point guard, although I have to admit, we all know, and probably from the beginning, Reggie Jackson does not want to be a backup, is not going to like
True.
not bristle at being a backup, even if it is to Steph Curry.
He
Um,
yeah, he wouldn't to Russ, one of the greatest. So
yeah, yeah. you
I
you
mean,
subtle you subtly tricked me into agreeing with that.
there we go.
Or do we get somebody like and I mean we'll have the 31st pick, so we could still get Parsons with that. But like, do we go backup point guard who might bristle at being a backup point guard and is probably gonna have to play a lot alongside Steph, which changes how many minutes we can kind of allot to like Kawhi and DeRozan in terms of like certain lineup structures and stuff. Um, I think I'd probably go getting Jimmy with that 20th pick too, and hopefully having enough minutes between DeRozan, Jimmy, and Kawhi to develop all three.
That's interesting. I would not do Jimmy. I'm not gonna lie to you.
That's
But
fair.
I like where you're coming with it, and I could definitely understand that for sure. And you know what? I mean, if I don't know, we talked about. I just feel personality wise, it wouldn't work. And I'm like, am I getting the best
I
return on
kind of
Jimmy
agree.
now?
But I feel like that's the exact same issue with Reggie.
Well, okay, but the only difference with that is that we can just do, if that's the case, Brandon Knight and
Well,
Chandler
Brandon Knight was
Parsons.
taken with the 8th pick. There's no way
Oh,
Brandon
there's no
Knight
way
would be
Brandon Knight would
available with
still be
20th.
there. That is
Yeah.
true. So then, if that's the case, aye, because you're right. I forgot he was drafted so late.
Yeah. Then we get into the like, do we go with a Reggie or a Jimmy, which does have some drawbacks, as noted. Like, obviously, they both have had really good careers. Jimmy, much more so. But like, do we go with somebody like that, or do we go with somebody like a Nikola Mirotic, a Kenneth Faried, or a Chandler Parsons, knowing that they're probably coming in expecting to be the backup 4.
That's true. I mean, man, it's
Or are
tough.
there any like boogie backup prospects? I don't really think there are, but like like at this point, we start.
What?
We
What?
have like
Mhm.
4 players already locked in, 5 if we keep Beasley. We just get
Yeah.
Kawhi, so that's like 6 kind of core pieces that need a lot of minutes, need a lot of
Yeah.
development, need a lot of that sort of stuff. So at that point, do we draft somebody who's coming in expecting to get a
To get
lot of
rolled. To get.
usage, a lot like a big role and stuff like that, and who might bristle at having a smaller role, which is Reggie
Hmm.
and eventually Jimmy. I think at the time, in his first couple of years, I think Jimmy would be totally like okay with, you know, kind of platooning with Kawhi and DeMar. Um, and
And then
kind of
flip him when he
developing
gets.
the argument against drafting Kawhi and Jimmy is it's really hard to develop 2 players in the same role, same position at the same time. Like Kyle Lowry and Mike Conley, both of them went on to become very, very good all-star and all-NBA quality players.
Yep.
But neither of them did it while they played together with the Grizzlies.
Hmm. Very
There's
true.
only so much developmental focus you can give. So I think the question is at that 20th pick, how do we prioritize what we go with?
What if we went with more marginal players who could fill a more defined role? So we look
Yeah.
at Chandler Parsons, who we know what he can do, right? We saw what he did in
Yeah.
Houston. We saw what he did in Dallas, right? You look at like Jimmy Butler, same thing you mentioned. Look at
Hmm.
Reggie Jackson, flourishing later on in Detroit, also with the Clippers, right? What if we swung it to another guard, another big, who both went kind of late in the second round? And the guard and big I'm thinking about is E'Twaun Moore and John Lure.
Hmm.
Both those guys,
I get
primary
where you're
bench
coming from. Like
roles.
John
Yep,
Lure was a shooter, a shooting
yep.
big,
Bench
who would
big.
again would allow for kind of 40 minutes of not not even close to a poor man's love, but fills the same role within our offense to a certain degree.
Hmm.
Yeah, like I'm a big proponent of like my favorite organization has been the San Antonio Spurs. You can't quite tell I'm wearing a Manu shirt right now. Shout out to
Oh,
Manu going
Hall of
into the
Famer.
hall. Yep. Love Manu.
Yep.
But I think a large part of what made the Spurs such a strong team over such a long time is they always fleshed out their depth to those players didn't necessarily have the same level to them that their starters had outside of Manu, obviously. Um, but those players still fit the same offensive system roles just to a lesser extent than the starters. And
Hmm.
so they didn't have to change everything up whenever they went to a non-starter lineup.
Yep.
And so like I personally really value that. And that's why I think like Jimmy's interesting because he can fill the exact same role Kawhi's going to fill. Um, and both of them, if you want to stretch them a little bit more when DeMar's off the court, as long as you still have a Steph and a Boogie or a Love on the court as well, like those guys can get some more play, some more development on ball in certain moments. There's also guys like Bojan Bogdanovic was taken 31st in this draft who could also fill a similar kind of like shooting big role. Um, I don't know if it would be wise to drop down too far to take like Lure and who was the point guard you mentioned?
Oh, E'Twaun Moore.
Each one more.
And
Yeah,
I say that because E'Twaun Moore, solid shooter,
yeah,
smart
yeah, yeah.
playmaker, plays good defense. These guys are not going to get outside roles, but they're going to perform well
Yep.
in the roles. And like you said,
Yes.
the archetype of that player, he is a Klay Thompson archetype in
Hmm.
that way. Obviously, a very
Yeah.
poor man's version of that. John Lure,
Yeah.
Kevin Love, they come off the bench, they fit well.
Yeah. In which case, I would, if that were the route we would go, I would suggest moving the 20th pick for additional value as well as I think we'd have the 31st pick and maybe pick up a second in another second in this round in this draft, plus future draft capital for the 20th pick, and maybe like filler, a Corey Brewer, Sebastian Telfair, Craig Smith, Ryan Gomes, whomever is still kind of like on our roster. I think that's one approach. I'm also kind of subtly liking the idea of going with a Chandler Parsons or Nikola Mirotic at 20.
I like that too. I can get with that.
Because I feel like those guys, particularly Mirotic, because he was already a professional player overseas, like I feel like they would come in and they would know, like, okay, my role is to, like, I might play not a ton of minutes, but I know what my role is going to be, and I'm going to fill it, and I'm going to fill it well. It's hard to not take Jimmy or Reggie Jackson knowing what their careers have become, but I feel like that might be a more advantageous route with that 20th pick, considering we just locked Kawhi into that starting lineup that we've developed. I think that might be a solid approach, and then we'd still have the 31st pick with which we can, address like getting a Etwan Moore, or we could go Chandler Parsons and then roll the dice on Reggie, not bristling at being a backup point guard. Like, I think you have to kind of do one of those two kind of approaches, because the other thing I think often falls prey to, teams fall prey to, and it's one of the issues with the rebuilding strategy that Sam Presti and Danny Ainge are employing, is you can definitely have too much talent. You definitely can have too much talent because you still have to develop that talent. And it's kind of like, and I was just having this discussion with my pregnant wife. We were talking about how messed up that 16 and counting, that family that had like 16 children. I think they're up to like 19 or something now. And how at a certain point it's detrimental to the kids or the players you're trying to develop right now, because you only have so much developmental resources. You only have so much touches, minutes, like usage and roles within different lineups, that you can't really develop, 8 players to NBA heights at the same time. It's just not really feasible.
Yeah.
And so I get the appeal of like, let's just collect as much talent as possible, throw them all at the board, see which darts stick, and then like we'll deal with the rest. But I don't think that's the best team building strategy when you already have some talent that you've identified and you're already working on developing, which in our case would be true. So I think with that 20th pick, we need to figure out, are we going with somebody who maybe has more talent, a higher ceiling, or are we going to go with somebody who's going to make sure that we have that consistency behind somebody like a Kevin Love, or behind a Steph or a DeMar?
That's a tough one. Where are you leaning now?
Personally, I'm leaning trading the 20th pick for future capital, like continuing to spin it down the line, and with that 31st pick taking Parsons.
You know what? This was honestly, I think we spent the most time on this, and
it was the 20th pick.
yeah, which is just classic us, I think.
Yes.
But also, I feel like with good reason, because it's a delicate balance when you do roster construction. And I'm the king of, on my base level, just throwing stuff together. But I'm aware of, okay, a team has to work together. It has to find a certain way to mesh. And especially, with your experience here and what you brought up, even with the Mike Conley, Kyle Lowry example, like, it's a deft process to do. And so it does take a lot of analysis, a lot of figuring out, what pieces fit where. I love that we did this. So I'm going to do that with you too. That 20th pick, I'm sure it'll get us something, in return. It's a nice place right with talent.
Yeah.
for another team to make what could potentially for them be an easier decision.
Hmm.
Being that they won't have the same roster holes or needs or lack thereof that we have. But I totally like trading that 20th pick and late in that with that 30th one, the 31st, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
31st.
will pick up Chandler Parsons.
Yep.
So I'm gonna add that as
So
well.
Kawhi and Parsons for the 2011 draft.
Okay. Good, good, good. Okay, now we go to our last draft of the David Kahn era. And honestly, these two shouldn't take too long. They're both late, one late first rounder and one late second. But with the late first rounder, we have the 18th pick. Now this would be when we said we're going to trade Al Jefferson. So let's just propose that we did the Al Jefferson deal.
Hmm.
We got this pick back,
Yeah, yeah.
like real life. That's what happened. Who do you like late in this draft? Now the 2012 draft. Just while we're kind of recapping here. This is the draft that had AD, go number one, Dame Lillard, Draymond Green, Bradley Beal, Chris Middleton, all these good guys, and we are not in this mix. So all the
Yeah.
way down the list, I just want to give an idea of the
Well, I
draft
mean,
class we're talking about.
Draymond and Chris Middleton both were taken with the 35th and 39th pick. So there were
Oh, so we could swing on those at
and
18.
like Jay Crowder was 34th, Will Barton was 40th. Um like there were some solid players
Late.
who were taken a little late. The question is, we have, so again, just outlaying our thought process. We already have Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Love, DeMarcus Cousins, and Chandler Parsons. And we also have like Jeremy Lin as a backup point guard
Mm-hmm.
from a previous draft. So we have a lot of young talent already, and we have a lot of mouths to feed offensively. Um, and so and in theory, we might even have multiple picks in this draft, but who knows? Because we can't really speculate exactly what we would have gotten for trading some of those, like the 20th pick in the last draft. So the question kind of becomes, what further pushes our team up? What elevates our team more? What raises the tide and lifts all of our boats the most? And we got the rebounding on lock with Boogie and K Love. We got plenty of shooting. We got shot creation in Steph, DeMar. We know that Kawhi eventually develops that. We know that Love and Boogie can also create for themselves and play make for others. We've got a lot of stuff. We're still a little light on defense. Kawhi
Mm-hmm.
is arguably the only particularly good defender we have. Like, Boogie had his moments. Steph is a better defender than people often give him credit for, but really Kawhi is the only strong defender that we have. So that's probably where I would try to focus on. That said, the obvious pick is Draymond, but we already have Kevin Love, Boogie, and Chandler Parsons. So unless we're flipping those guys for anything, it's kind of hard to justify taking Draymond.
I mean, I wouldn't mind flipping K-Love.
I know you.
But no. But if we're
But
going
yeah.
to keep it the team concept and do something differently, remember Caleb was even able to be traded primarily off of the sins of David Kahn in
Yes,
not
yes.
negotiating that contract. So we're not doing that.
Yeah,
With that
and
being
we're
said,
talking, this was still Minnesota Kevin Love,
yeah,
not Cleveland Kevin Love. We're talking consistent high number double doubles,
which
3-point
is
shooting and passing. Like, no one else in the league at the time brought what he brought to the table.
no, and that's
But
almost
I
why it's
also understand what you're
tantalizing.
talking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's almost tantalizing to trade him because like Kevin Love at that time, before he became Cleveland Kevin Love, yielded you the number one pick. Now, granted, it ended up being Andrew Wiggins, who we didn't know was going to be a little bit different. But bottom line, if we're talking first overall pick value for a guy like that on a win now team, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it took a certain level of circumstances to make that happen. That's still a very valuable player. You put Kevin Love in play. I mean, I've done this before in old school stuff, new stuff. Like that guy is yielding a return of some top tier talent in a major way if you believe in taking a next step, if you want to prioritize a different position, whatever the case may be,
Yep.
out of anyone else you have right there. Because DeMarcus Cousins, still young at that point, not getting something like that. Chandler Parsons, you get late in the second, the value's great, but you're not getting that. So
Yeah, well,
if
he's
you
also
wanted
not
to,
having the same type of rookie year he
of
had with
rookie,
Houston because he's playing behind Kevin Love. So,
and
like,
that
yeah,
is true.
yeah,
So you're right.
yeah,
He's not going to even give it the opportunity to even come out breakthrough in that way. Well, potentially in that way. He ended up having a breakthrough, but it was different.
yeah, yeah,
But again, with that being said, I'm torn because on the one hand, I would do that, but that would be another hypothetical of what picks would
yeah,
trade to
yeah,
be
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Whole another rabbit hole. So we keep Kevin Love. My guy, actually, that I would throw out there would be Kent Bazemore. I would almost
Interesting. Okay.
punt on this pick. And when I say punt on, I'm not finding the perfect value at 18 for a draft as deep as this would be. But fit wise, I mean, you get Chris Middleton. How long is he going to be Chris Middleton? Like, Chris Middleton is a second
Well,
tier guy who.
he'd be playing behind DeMar DeRozan and Kawhi too. So, like, again,
Well,
how long does it take for Middleton to get the opportunity
to
to
even do that.
develop to what we know? Yeah.
And that's if, of course, DeMar is at this point playing, playing well, whatever the case, maybe
Yeah,
we're a
yeah.
couple years in. So you're right. Or even Austin Rivers. I want guys, again, I'm trying to do that
Well, I mean,
model of,
Austin went 10th, so I
oh, I
don't
keep
think.
forgetting that Austin go in so early. Darn it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, New Orleans, didn't he? Yes.
Yes, yes.
Ah,
Which
yeah, yeah.
originally was a Minnesota pick, by the way. But
Oh, funny. Yep.
um, the
Or
so
Jermichael Green, I like.
here's where I'm coming from. Jay Crowder. Um, again, Kawhi's the only defensive player we have at this point, really. Jay's another guy, much like Chandler Parsons, who's going to come in, accept the role, back up Kawhi, allows us to potentially have Kawhi shift up to some backup 2 minutes every now and then. Like, there's not a whole lot, and it's weird because, again, Draymond Green and Chris Middleton are available. But again, would Draymond Green and Chris Middleton become the Draymond Greens and Chris Middletons that we know them to be now if they're, playing behind other players? And like, even with Draymond, it took a David Lee injury to like let him get his chance to shine. So, like, it's tough in these circumstances. It's easy in hindsight bias to just collect all the talent and, like, bam, we got Draymond too. Draymond backs up Boogie. Like, it's hard for me to realistically think that, like, a team at that time, especially given the context that we're saying we're in, would necessarily view Draymond as a center, as the backup to Boogie. Although in theory, given Draymond's defensive, I'm talking myself into Draymond, given
Yes.
Draymond's defensive capabilities, you could draft him even if you think he's a power forward, because then he can platoon with Love when Boogie's sitting, and you still have some degree of size and rebounding while still having the defensive element of Draymond. So, and that wouldn't necessarily kill Chandler Parsons as well, because Parsons can still get some minutes at the 3, minutes at the 4, and Draymond basically gets the backup center minutes, even though he's playing alongside Love, or if we're playing a particularly bad bench team like him and Parsons.
You make an excellent point. I feel like I was talked into a player, talked out of a player, but
I did that to myself too.
ooh, that's tough. I mean, honestly, at this point, I feel it's one of those decisions where you just pick best player available and then, like, look at your roster and make moves related to that. I think Draymond Green is the best player available. You know
I
what he will
agree.
do to a defense. You bring
Mhm.
him in. You look at your front court. Beasley got to go. Beasley got to go. Kevin,
Yeah, yeah.
like at that point, if you bring Draymond Green in, of course, hindsight being a big part of this because
Oh yeah,
no one
yeah,
knew
for
Draymond
sure.
was going to be Draymond here.
Although I do think it gets overblown, Draymond's draft evaluation at the time. A lot of it was primarily due to his size. A lot of
But
it
I mean,
was
that's
like, oh,
huge.
he can't defend bigs. Like, he's
Yeah,
only 6'8". Like,
but knowing that he can changes everything.
exactly. Like, the thing is, at Michigan State in college, he did do basically what we've seen him do with the Warriors, just not dialed up to 11. Like he did a lot of what he already did in college. It's just people looked at him like, okay, well, yeah, but it's that power. It's the college power forward, NBA
So
three.
what
People are like,
wasn't done
but
for
is Draymond
Beasley?
a small forward?
Mm-hmm.
And no, Draymond's not a small forward. He's actually a center. Um,
Yep.
so like, I think the evaluation of Draymond never should have fallen as far as he did anyway, because Draymond always projected to be a quality defender. Maybe not like, obviously, I don't think anybody would expect him to become a like Depoy and the greatest defender of his generation type player.
No, first ballot
But
Hall of Famer.
there was a lot that Draymond showed at Michigan State that would fit exactly what our team could use off the bench.
Fair enough. I say we take him.
Okay.
I say we take him. I like that we had the discussion,
those blowouts with him and Boogie in the locker room will be very entertaining. But
you know what? I mean, they shared a year together.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. So
there's precedent for it. It would be entertaining, but we've seen it happen, and it wasn't horrible. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Okay, well, with that being said, we have one more pick to make a decision on.
Yeah,
that would be the 58th, the 40th.
40th. Oh yeah, you're right, because they then traded that. Yeah, at that point, Chris Middleton's off the board. The actual 40th pick was Will Barton. Like you mentioned, there's not a ton here. Like, I guess you could take a flyer on somebody like a Mike James, who we know went on to have some good games every now and then, or
interesting moments, yes.
Like or a Kent Bazemore. That could be a good Kent Bazemore spot, I think.
You know what? I say we go with that. I'm looking at where I was trying to see where JaMychal Green was drafted.
JaMychal, along with Kent Bazemore, was undrafted.
Okay, but then again, we already just got Draymond.
If we already have Draymond, Kevin Love,
we don't need
and Parsons.
We don't need JaMychal at all. Yep. Kent Bazemore it is. Wow. You know what's funny? This just shows you how interesting it is when you're not doing a straight up redraft.
Yeah.
When you're drafting on need, this type of team exercise. Where the moves they make in 2009. That was easy.
They have ripple effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, exactly. Now, how do we make the effect of 2012, 2013? So now we have, and I have this written down here, just to kind of close out what we have done over these 4 years in real time here. We have drafted Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan, DeMarcus Cousins. So Steph Curry and DeMar DeRozan, 2009.
Yeah.
DeMarcus Cousins, Jeremy Lin, 2010. Kawhi Leonard, Chandler Parsons, 2011. Draymond Green, Kent Bazemore, 2012.
Yep.
These are the selections of the new and improved Minnesota Timberwolves, who now have a rotation of Curry, DeRozan, Cousins, with Lin, Kawhi, Parsons, Green, and Bazemore in the mix. The front court still has to be figured out because you have Kevin Love as well as Michael Beasley. So one of those guys.
Well, I feel like Beasley we'd probably flip once we
don't
got
say
Kawhi.
That to me,
dude.
No,
we have Kawhi. Again, we're not really flipping.
I'm messing with you.
We're not really flipping Minnesota Kevin Love.
No, we're
because
not.
also we wouldn't have pissed off Kevin Love as much as Kahn would have. So I don't think he would have been as open
in the
to
first place.
Which
means
So we're basically looking at a rotation of starters: Steph Curry, DeMar DeRozan, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Love, DeMarcus Cousins, with a bench of Jeremy Lin. I don't know if we ever really plugged behind DeRozan, but Jeremy Lin, Kent Bazemore on the wing, Chandler Parsons, and Draymond Green. And that doesn't factor in whatever we could get in trades for the guys that we had on our team when we started out with, such as Corey Brewer, Sebastian Telfair, Ryan Gomes, Craig Smith, etc.
Yeah, it went.
And whatever we could net for Beasley.
That is true.
Sorry.
I mean, it
That
hurts.
would be, you know, what's funny is like I'm picturing this as if we actually were co-GMs. Breaking it to Beasley would be easier than like having to console Corbin after we make the decision. Like I
Yes.
feel like Beasley would be like, yeah, sure, whatever, man. And then like I'd have to take Corbin out for drinks after, and we'd have like
Yes.
a long night of like what could have been and all sorts
No,
of
he was
stuff.
gonna be our next star. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
you totally right. I would lose it myself. But no, this was fun, Josh. This was a massive episode, show as our shows tend to be. But I love the in-depth breakdown of talking about a executive who, you know, it was in a unique situation, made some interesting decisions, is known and probably blamed rightfully so for some of the bad ones, but also putting on the GM hat and being in his shoes, you could see the complexities of being in such a scenario, even in this very rough simulation of a tenure of an executive, and how that goes. So this is really interesting. I can't wait to do this again with you. We're gonna have to figure out probably after this who our next
I have an
target.
idea.
All right, I want to hear it from you, man. But
Mhm.
before we go and let you go, can you share, folks, where they can find you, your work,
Yeah.
and more of this?
Yeah, so you can find me at on Twitter at 2redjearl. That's URL for Earl. Also, I am a basketball career development coach. I help people who are trying to build their dream career in basketball as a coach, a scout, front office personnel, analytics person, content creators. I work with all of them. So if you're one of those people who's feeling a little frustrated at your current state of your career in basketball, look up yourhoopscareer.com, drop me a line, and we can talk and see if there's a way I can help you out.
Gotta love it. I gotta love it. Take it from me firsthand. Josh knows what he's talking about. We'll put you in the best position to succeed and open your eyes to ideas that you never thought of in terms of how to break in this really confusing, complicated business. But it's still a journey, and such as it is, so is our show here. Thank you again for joining us. Definitely make sure to follow Josh on Twitter. Definitely make sure to follow me on Twitter as well at Corbin NBA. Appreciate y'all for staying with it. If you made it to the end, we really do appreciate you. But until next time, for Josh, for myself, we are Frosty. Y'all stay frosty, and I will talk to y'all real soon.